This is my action research project titled Feedback is Fabulous. So a little setting overview about my current placement. I am at Mission Hills High School in a 10th grade chemistry in the Earth Systems class. So we use open-sided curriculum, which is NGSS Alive and phenomenon driven. So the current unit we're in is oysters. It goes over ocean acidification, focusing on acid-base chemistry and the environmental impact of. The student demographics I have is 36 students, specifically in the class that I use for my action research and the student examples that I will show. Ages 15 to 16, 2 EBs, 8 RFEPs with 4 504s, 1 IEP. The instructional approach we have is differentiated support, so different visual aids, scaffolding, group work, hands-on labs, collaborative learning, and technology integration. That's all built into our curriculum and built into our class. That really helps our EL and students with IEPs and 504s be successful, and all of our students in the class. So I really like that approach. In phase 1 and 2 of my action research project, I was doing, my first goal was thinking like, okay, I have worksheet responses and I will just get better at grading worksheets. That obviously is not a super observable and measurable. My students are not always going to have a direct correlation from one worksheet to the other because it might be different content. So I got more specific over time, and I actually ended up using something that was in my informal assessment at first, was some whiteboard responses that student had made to academic language lesson or segment of a lesson, and I got some great responses, but it showed me that students needed to continue practice with academic language and be given feedback. So these are 3 like awesome answers that I just randomly got to save afterwards when I realized this is what I wanted to focus on. So I just wanted to include those. But I, after this, got to form my research question, which is, will providing constructive feedback on student academic language help students better synthesize information? I arrived here because my phase 1 data showed that students were doing measurable work without receiving feedback. I wondered if timely constructive feedback could improve their comprehension, and I refined this question to be specific to academic language and support feedback because I wanted something that was done, that I was going to do multiple times, so I could really have good analysis on their improvement over time. And this was helpful because then I had a better understanding of what I was measuring for this project, and I of course got this after collaborating with colleagues and getting my question more specific and classroom relevant. Phase 3, I use Google Docs and Sheets to track revision and feedback responsive. And then my formal assessment was a unit assessment at the end. And so here I really got to collect all my data from those, and instructional adjustments I made was giving additionally modeling and sentence starters to students who weren't able to get to that depth of a response, especially my students that were requiring extra language support. I really wanted to give that to them, and I shifted my original approach to feedback was pretty general, and I wanted it action oriented, and that was with my UDLs that I highlight in this presentation. So I also added incentive, credit, or no credit, and this helped motivate student revisions. And I was lucky enough to have a CT that allowed me to do that. So assessments that I used were formative, so worksheet responses, peer reviews, teacher check-ins, and I have a rubric that I will show, and that was for a model that students made, and it included the academic language segment, exit tickets, which I will show, and then a summative end of unit exam, end of lesson exam. So that was of course aligned with our content standards, PBS 1 and ESSD 3. Phase 3, I was giving targeted feedback specifically on their exit ticket, and students got to revise their work and then use that revision to be able to do the formal assessment at the end, and working with colleagues gave me the time and space to refine my research to be very specific and measurable and figure out what tools I wanted to use to test my students with. My UDLs were action and expression, setting clear goals and anticipating challenges. Challenges in academic language are ever prevalent, and I wanted to make sure students understood why we were learning these words and how they were important to the lesson, and not just say them to them. I wanted them to practice with them. So highlighting patterns and big ideas with those repeated words words. They heard them so many times, but they weren't able to use them in a sentence, and I wanted them to be able to. Engagement, especially giving feedback, is the point of my whole research project. So the critical practice, again aligned with feedback, is value-based assessment, evaluation, and grading. I decided to use value-based assessment and get my students to talk like a scientist. Instead of the traditional methods, such as having students just write and define terminology, I wanted them to actively use the words in their language. And this promoted revision and reflection and getting students' voice in the classroom. This was what I posted during the informal assessment, during the exit ticket. So this has all the definitions on there, but I didn't require my students to use my definitions or to I didn't want them to just write a definition. I said that these are up here if you need to look at them and remember what I've defined as these words, but I really want you to use them in a scientific context however you think of them. So I at first did this by not presenting the definitions and then presenting them, and I saw I had students edit their sentences over time. So one day they just outlined them, and then the next day they really refined them, and that's when they were given the definitions. And even so, with that, I was very scaffolded, but I really realized that it was my job to give better specific feedback on this, because I have some really great sentences shown here in my exit tickets, but there's also some that can use some improvement, and I wanted them to get that action-oriented feedback for their academic language. So this is the rubric that I use for my model, and on number 4 I have the science words, and I went over this rubric with them when they were getting tested, so they knew what I was expecting of them, and they use this as a reflection tool. This one is their self-assessment tool, and then I use that to grade them as well. This was the empty words put up on the screen, no definitions, that was displayed during formal assessment, so they knew what words, when I was saying use science words specific to the unit, these were the words I was talking about. I titled them the words to talk like a scientist. So formal assessment, these are my student responses I had. The words were given with no definitions provided, and I wanted to include these. These are raw student responses, so there's a lot of grammar issues or words not spelt right, but I just wanted to show really what my students said and how this helped their academic language really blossom in their summative assessment. I was really proud of them for being able to use those words in a sentence without looking at a definition, just to be able to talk with those words. And so to be able to measure that, I had them type it out. So I really liked those were included. And the formative assessment result in general is still under review, but initial student responses already demonstrate a deeper understanding of achieved through targeted feedback. So in the future, I hope to compare this data with results from previous assessments. And a challenge I encountered was that the rubric grading is not currently a part of my placements culture, and that's difficult to extrapolate to data consistently. I want to use this data to modify my instruction and revisit the standards as needed once I'm able to really collect all that data. So this project has inspired me to continue refining how I integrate and analyze feedback in my classroom to support student learning. My aha moments were improved clarity and responses, increased engagement with feedback. Students started to really actually want to talk in this way, and using feedback as a learning tool. It's not just about students getting the answer right, it's about them having a conversation on how we can synthesize concept more effectively. My key learnings was how important it is as a teacher to be more intentional and reflective, the value of action research, that it has really helped me adapt in real time, and using UDL actually in the classroom, knowing with exact time when I'm going to use UDL. Equity through critical practice was to talk like a scientist, giving student voice as revision for learning tools. Collaboration, of course, in action research was so helpful for me to get that really good project. And a big takeaway is small changes like meaningful feedback can shift classroom culture and empower student learning.